I was recently engaged with a small group of guys, and we were just really doing some of that real man coaching kind of stuff where you talk about the stuff that generally you hide from other people. You know, that stuff that's really bugging you inside, that makes you want to slam your fist through a wall, makes you want to scream out loud, but you don't want anybody else to see that or hear that. And so you got to guard your tongue, and you got to guard your thoughts. And you got to guard the facial expressions and your body language, because you might have a tell like a bad game of poker.
Welcome to Leading Leaders Podcast. 5-minute videos, 5 days a week.
I'm Loren Norris with Leading Leaders Podcast. I've been a disciple of the Christian faith just over 30 years now. A little bit longer than that. And the challenge for a lot of us is when you live and work in the real world as a real man, as a football player, as a soldier, as a firefighter, those are the journeys that I've been on. Those are the relationships that I've been in. I've raised 2 sons. My baby is now 21. I've got an older son who's 23 and a daughter who's 25-ish and one who's 30-ish. I don't give their ages because they're women, and that's not a good thing, right? That'll get you in trouble. But the reality of being a man in today's world is that masculinity is under attack. And you've got to be guarded about how and when you act and talk and act like a man, right? More power. But there's also a time when you've got to be honest and real. And for a lot of my youth, my leadership skills were second to my fighting for my own space in the world. And when I dug into scripture, I was the kind of guy who would quote it to you left and right. I knew it, I understood it, I remembered it, I could tell you where it came from and who he was talking to and why he said it. And the more I've grown, the more I've studied, and the more of those things there are in me. But here's what I found. I love the way Dr. Robert Morris, pastor of Gateway Church, puts it. He says, you know, what we strive for is not perfection, because we will never achieve that. That makes it a waste of time. What we do strive for is excellence. And that means that we do the very best we can with what we have and who we are. And grace covers the gap between excellence and perfection. So as I'm sitting in this group, a conversation with a bunch of guys, one of the guys has a moment of frustration and he just blurts out a string of profanity, and he looks at me like, oh my gosh, what's he going to do? How's he going to react to that? And I just kind of giggled and I said, I get it. I've been there. I felt exactly the same thing. I probably said exactly the same thing. But you know what? It's not about the words. It's about realizing that you've got grit. You're willing to face the problem and fight through it rather than cover it over with a little butter sugar icing and make it look sweet. So I would prefer grit with integrity that says, you know what? I'm all jacked up and I need help. I need somebody else to come alongside me and help whip me into shape. I need somebody to tell me that I'm wrong and that I'm off course. I need that. But I'm not going to just kowtow to anybody with ideas. I want to hear somebody press me strong and push me on to be better, to draw me and drive me to excellence. And frankly, I'd rather work with guys like that as my coaching clients than the ones who want to show up every time and pretend like everything is fine. They don't have any problems. They've already worked it all out. They're so smart, so intelligent, so wealthy. They've never had a problem. They don't know what it means to be ramen noodle broke. They don't get it. Never been there. They don't know what it's like to call the electric company and beg them to take half of the payment because they don't know how to deal with that. I don't want to deal with people who would lie and hide that kind of stuff, or lie and hide their language, or lie and hide their emotions, and try to wait for somebody else to fix the problem without them knowing about it. I just want to delegate these personal problems. Let me tell you something. First time I heard John Maxwell say, work on your strengths, focus on your strengths, forget about your weaknesses. The first thing that went to my mind was, if you focus on your strengths and not your weaknesses, you're a liar. You're deceptive. You are faking it till you make it. There's nothing real about you. There is no authenticity in that. And he said, no, I'm not talking about character weaknesses. I'm not talking about moral weaknesses or personality weaknesses. I'm talking about those skill sets that you have. If you know that you're great at throwing a football, get a job throwing a football. If you know you're not any good at throwing a football, then get a job doing something you're really good at. Focus on the skill strengths. Let somebody else handle the skill areas where you're weak. But when it comes to your character, no one can do your push-ups but you. So if we're engaged in a conversation and it gets real and it gets raw and emotions get serious, I'm not going to explode. I'm not a mainspring wound too tight, although I was at one point in my life. I'm not the guy who only knows how to converse by throwing scripture verses at you, although I was at one point in my life. I'm a guy who's lived through both sides of that for a long time. I've studied scripture and leadership and business and marketing and sales. And I bring all of that stuff to the table to help people achieve excellence. And all day long, without batting an eye, I would much rather work with someone who's got grit with integrity than to deal with someone who has pretentious piety. Don't pretend to be holier than thou. It's not necessary, and it's not grace. I'm Loren Norris with Leading Leaders Podcast for Tell It Like It Is TV. Have a blessed day.
Subscribe now for our extensive video library of leadership lessons promoting faith, family, and freedom.